Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to welcome you warmly. I am Romaine Jean. I'm a journalist. I'm very happy to be together with you today to start this webinar series on a very, very important topic, gender equality and diversity in science. To introduce this webinar, I would like to quote Jennifer Doudna. She was a Nobel Prize winner last year, and she said, this award is a step in the right direction. But as many women, I feel that no matter what I do, my work will never be seen as it will be if there were a man. I think there's a lot of to say on this topic of gender equality. The webinars have been organized and prepared by the platform Biology of the Swiss Academy of Sciences. I now give the floor to Christoph Scheidegger, president of the platform Biology, and Astrid Oberson, she's member of the Organising committee. They are both senior scientists, and they will tell us about the genesis and the aims of this operation. Please, Herr Scheidegger.
Hi, it's a pleasure to welcome you to the first seminar of the webinar series on achieving gender equality and diversity in the natural sciences. This webinar series has been prepared over the last years by the platform Biology of the Swiss Academy of Sciences, SCNA. The platform Biology brings together researchers from 17 national specialist societies and 5 national committees in the field of biology. It is chaired by a militia committee, the Presidium, and supported by an office in Bern. Besides supporting projects by the specialist societies, the platform Biology also initiates cross-cutting projects for its member organizations and beyond in the domains of promotion of young scientists and research culture. This webinar series, though developed by biologists, is hoped to reach a broad audience within biology and beyond. We believe that the topic is important and timely also for other scientific disciplines. And the webinar is about equality, gender, cultural background, career development cycle, to mention only a few aspects that cannot all be considered equally within this webinar series. I wish the organizers and the audience a stimulating and successful webinar. Thank you.
Good afternoon, a warm welcome to everybody. Many women study natural sciences, but they are still widely underrepresented compared to men in advanced and leading positions. This also applies to the discipline wherein I teach and to research. Around 50% of all students are women, but at higher level positions, we typically have less than 20% of women. Thus, as docent, senior scientist, and as former president of the Swiss Society of Agronomy, I am confronted to this situation and wonder about its causes and its consequences. What started as an informal coffee break chat around that topic during an annual platform meeting resulted in the decision of the platform Biology of the Swiss Academy of Sciences to organize this series of public webinars. The webinars are the result of the engaged collaboration of the organizing committee members, Carmen Faso, Nicolas Mesch, Didier Picard, Laurent Vallotton. And we have been supported by the SCNAT office in Bern, namely Caroline Raymond and Claudia Rutte. Thank you very much. The aim of the webinars is to address causes and consequences of the underrepresentation of women in advanced and leading positions, and to propose solutions for achieving a wider diversity in science and research. We hope that the webinars will stimulate discussion among professionals and raise awareness among members of the expert societies on their role in promoting a higher diversity. I'm now warmly handing over to Romain Jean.
Thank you, Christoph Scheidegger, and thank you, Astrid Oberson Dreyer. So the fact women are still underrepresented in leading positions in the science. Why? How to change it? In this first webinar, we want to provide background information on the historical and current situation. We have two speakers today, Daniela Hansen from ETH Zurich and Dr. Andrea Zimmermann from the University of Basel. Let me just tell you before that this webinar lasts 1 hour. It will be recorded, and we are very happy because we have already more than 300 people following us live. It's very good. Each speaker will make a 20 minutes presentation, after which the audience, you, will have the opportunity to ask questions. You have a Q&A button on your screen, and you can write your question. It's not a conference, it's really a discussion. It will be very good if you are involved in it. I now cede the floor to Daniela Hansen, ETH Zurich. She's really a reference in gender studies, in gender issues. She's project manager on a career building program for female scientists, and she will present us the leaky pipeline phenomenon. Please, Daniela Hansen.
Thank you very much, Romain, and thank you very much for inviting me. It's really a pleasure to have this talk. Thank you. So I will now share my screen. Just takes always a few seconds. Is it okay?
Yep, yeah, it's good.
Okay, good. Thank you. So thank you very much for the introduction. My name is Daniela Hansen. I work at the Equal Office at ETH Zurich. So the title of my talk is The Leaky Pipeline, Losing Talents, because I really think that with this phenomenon of the leaky pipeline, we lose a lot of talents, of very well educated women and talented women. So this is just a short overview of my talk. I will show you different leaky pipelines because it depends on the research topics. I will give you an overview of a survey on the reasons to leave academia for female scientists, which was done in 2016. And then I will talk about Professor Londa Schiebinger's 3 strategic approaches, what can be done against this leaky pipeline. Londa Schiebinger, she's a professor of history of science at Stanford. So I think this description of the leaky pipeline was also mentioned in the abstract. Leaky pipeline stands for the decreasing proportion of women in university studies towards advanced and leading positions in research and science. And as mentioned before, I think we lose a lot of well-educated female scientists and we lose talents, and this is something we cannot afford. So this is the first leaky pipeline I would like to show you. This graph, it's a graph from 2018 of whole Switzerland. It's not the recent ones, but I can assure you nothing much has changed since then. So here you can see in blue is of the lines for the social sciences and humanities. This is the smallest leaky pipeline. In violet are the STEM fields, which builds the largest one, and in life science bit comparable to social sciences and humanities. So you can see in the STEM fields, we start with a percentage of about 23, 24 female students. Bachelor, master's degrees a bit down, a PhD a bit up, and then at the scientific collaborators, so at the postdoc level, the leaky pipeline starts. But just to mention, we already start with a very low number of female students. And you can see here at the professor level, so we are here at 12, 13% of female professors. This is very, very low. Why does the pipeline start to leak at the postdoc level? That's because at this stage in life, when personal life transitions and professional ambitions start colliding, that's when female scientists start about thinking of having children. And this is just to already come to a reason why the leaky pipeline exists. That's one of the main reasons for the female scientists to quit academia, is because they don't see a way how they can reconcile family and career. And this starts, as mentioned, at the postdoc level. This is the leaky pipeline at ETH in 2019. The numbers are comparable. We here at a bit higher at the bachelor student with 30, I think it's 33%. And then again here at the postdoc level, the pipeline starts to leak. You can see here at an assistant professor level, there's an increase of female assistant professors. That's due to an initiative at ETH Zurich of the president. He appointed more female assistant professors. So we hope that this will continue. The next and the last leaky pipeline is also from ETH Zurich. I wanted to show you this because it shows how the pipelines are different in the different research fields. You can see here in orange and dark red, at the bachelor level, we start about 50% of female and male students. Masters, there are even more female students. Also at the PhD student level, we are at about 50%, and then postdoc level, it starts decreasing again. But in another department, in computer science, informatics, the numbers are much lower. Here we start at a bachelor student level of 16% of female students, and so it's much more attractive for female students to start studies in biology than in informatics. Now let's come to this survey that I mentioned on the reasons to leave academia for female scientists. I think this is a very, very important survey. It was done by a former project manager of the so-called Fix the Leaky Pipeline program, which is a career building program for women in science in the ETH domain. And this survey shows, as I mentioned before, that family life, so career and family, are not really compatible. This is the main reason for female scientists to leave academia. And this is, of course, connected to the worldwide mobility. Another reason is the insecurity in the scientific career, which we all know is a fact. And another point is the lack of female role models in a male-dominated environment. That's why we often at the Equal Office at ETH and also in the Fixed Leaky Pipeline program, we often organize female discussions, panel discussions with female role models, because it's very, very important for the young scientists to see how and to get to know how senior professors, female professors made it in their career. So that's always very, very attractive for the young scientists. What we also notice in the last few years, so I would say in the last 2-3 years, is that there are more and more female scientists that after they finish their studies, PhD, even postdoc, then they go to university, because in the Fixed Leaky Pipeline program, we organize a mentoring program also, a one-to-one mentoring, and there we realized that the mentees choose more and more mentors from industry. So I think this is really a shift that is going on, but again, we lose talented women then to industry. So now I'll come to Londa Schiebinger. She is, as mentioned, a professor of history of science at Stanford. She published in 2013 a book called Gendered Innovation: How Gender Analysis Contributes to Research. In this publication, she worked on 3 strategic approaches how to fix this leaky pipeline. The first one, fix the number of women. This is kind of obvious. We have established many programs, career building programs for female scientists, and they focus on increasing the number of women and other underrepresented groups. I have put in this in the presentation because I think there is also going on a shift from gender equality to diversity, and ETH is a bit behind in this whole change. But I think we are aware now that we also need to integrate other underrepresented groups. But now coming back to the 3 strategic approaches, the second one is fix the institutions. This means to promote gender inequality, and the key word here is structural change that needs to be done in the institutions. The third one is fix the knowledge. And with this third one, Londa Schiebinger means integrating sex and gender analysis into research. I will give you some examples just afterwards. So, but let's come to the first approach, which is the fix the number of women. Just 2 sentences on a historical view. Universities were created around man's life, and for a long time, women did not have access to universities. That's a historical fact. And now what is done? We have gender action plans, we have gender and diversity strategies, as mentioned, some career building programs for female scientists, the Fix the Leaky Pipeline program, HIT Connect, and the others. So I would say that every university has a career building program for their female scientists. And some of them are even institutional. For example, the HIT program is a national-wide program. We have the dual career effect. Every university organizes regular events catered to a female audience, workshops on topics such as leadership, career development, and so on. So this, I think for this first approach, we are on the way. We are not at the starting point. We have gone a certain way. For the second approach, fix the institutions, I think we have started, but we are not very far here. And as I mentioned before, that this cultural and structural change in the institution, this is what is needed. A change of a mindset is needed. And this means affecting a cultural and structural shift towards a scientific setting that is equally accessible to both genders and also to other diverse groups. And what I think is sometimes a bit neglected in this whole discussion is that academia is not an ivory tower. We live in a society and we are linked to this society. And for example, in Switzerland, on a legal level, there is equality between men and women. But as we all know that there's still a gap in a salary gap between men and women. So as long as there's still this inequality in society, we will have an inequality in academia. So this is linked to each other. What Londa Schiebinger also points out that the curriculum of the studies, for women, it's very important to have practice-oriented methods and to have an interdisciplinary cooperations. This is what women, what is important for women. Another point is raising awareness for gender equality, which I really sometimes realize when I talk to male scientists. They tell me, yeah, listen, we don't have a gender problem in our group. We have 2 women in our group. They feel very well. And then I asked them, did you ever talk to them if they really feel acknowledged and if they really feel well in the group? And then they tell me, no, I haven't. So what we often experience is that there is only one woman in a research group. And when they participate in one of the programs or at an event, then they tell me, oh, it's so nice to see that there are other women here. I can talk to them of my experiences in my research group. So they feel very isolated when they are the only woman in a research group. And what I also would like to point to is the job sharing and the part-time professorships. I think this is also a very important point, which is not so well at ETH. I'm not sure if there is even a job sharing or part-time professorship. I have listed here 4 examples. At University of Bern, I know of 2 professorships, job sharing professorships. At university, a part-time full professor, and also at FHNW, there's a job sharing professorship. So I think in this point there, in this second approach, fix the institutions, there's a lot of work to be done. And also in the third strategic approach, there's a lot to be done, fix the knowledge. This is also the topic on which Londa Schiebinger works intensively at the moment. What does she mean with this? It's meant that integrate sex and gender analysis into research. That this is meant with the term gendered innovation, which is also the title of her publication, the publication I mentioned before. What does she mean with that? So gendered innovations look at the questions scientists ask at the things engineer design and the methods they use. So it is important to integrate this category of sex and gender into analysis. And I think for me, the most logic, or one of the most logic examples is the gendered medicine. I think I recently participated in a discussion, I think organized by the University Hospital here in Zurich, and also the Charité Universitätsmedizin in Berlin. They have integrated gender medicine in their curriculum. So I think this is a very logic example that men and women react differently when they take the same drugs. So a lot of research needs to be done in this topic. And what I think is a really, first I had to laugh when I read this, is the pregnant crash test dummies. Londa Schiebing did research on this, and she found out that the first developed model of crash test dummies were, of course, American male. So she realized that the conventional seat belts are not fit to pregnant women properly, and this causes in accident severe accidents or harms the unborn child and also the pregnant woman. So this is, I think, also a very logic example how sex and gender, or in this topic, sex, can be integrated into research. Yes, therefore, I have come to an end. I hope that this was kind of logic and has brought some ideas and some reasons and so on to the discussion. So I will start my presentation. Sorry, Romain, I can't hear you.
Can't you hear me?
Yes.
Daniela? Okay,
yes.
Thank you very much. And as I said, yeah, sure, we can see the question of the audience with the Q&A application. But before, Daniela, I would like to ask you a question. The combination of career and family life seems still very hard in Switzerland. Have you made international comparison, either a country of reference which can serve as a model for Switzerland?
To be honest, I haven't, no. But what I know that in general, in Scandinavian countries, they are much more advanced in this topic. I know that, for example, there, I think parents have, I'm not sure, 1 or 2 years of parental leave. And I think this is also something we should think about. It's kind of this idea that this is also what I meant with the change of the mindset and the link to society. We here in Switzerland, I think we are a bit behind in thinking of integrating working mothers. It's the idea that, yeah, somebody become pregnant, then she can work less, the child is sick, and so on and so on. So this is really a discussion, a real discussion on the topic is needed. I think we are advancing, but it's slow. It's slow.
So we have another question on this topic. You have mentioned starting family as a main reason of this phenomenon, ask a follower, but would it be possible that the interview hiring politics at the university tends to be more favorable towards men?
Sorry, I didn't hear the whole question.
I repeat the question.
Yes, please.
You have mentioned starting family as a main reason of this Leaky Pipeline phenomenon. But would it be possible that the interview hiring politics at universities tend to be more favorable towards men?
I would say yes. but there are initiatives going on at ETH at the moment. I can only talk about ETH, that in the hiring committees, for example, for the appointment of professors, there has always been a gender delegate in this appointment committees, and this person is responsible that this question of does the gender play a role in the interviewing process, she or he has to really take is responsible for this, that the females candidates are also respected as the male candidates.
Yeah. We have two other questions. How to make men more engaged and aware of these topics? To hire many more women, fixed numbers, money is needed. How to do this?
Yes, that's a huge question. So with different projects, we are really trying to engage also men in this whole process of fixing this leaky pipeline. And I must really say I was first really, sorry for saying this, I was astonished how many male professors and male scientists really want to do something in this topic. So at ETH, we have really very, very engaged male professors. They talk at panel discussions. They have many female scientists in their groups, but they are not. That's not the majority. That's really not.
Claudia, Daniela, excuse me. I have a simple question. Can you say that the situation is changing really at the ETH, for instance? It's improving, or it's always the same thing, the same problem? Because we have heard from years that family life and career for the woman is very important, very difficult, and so on. Does it change?
It does change, but very slowly, very slowly. And if you look, we publish this equality gender monitoring every year, and when you compare the numbers 10 years ago to today, there's a small increase of numbers of the female scientists. Yes. And I think with this initiative that I mentioned of the ETH president to appoint more female assistant professors, and also maybe I can mention another number, I think this was in 2019 as well, the new hired professors, full professors, 21% were female professors, and this number is high. It's much more than in previous years. So I think there's an awareness coming, but yes, I mean, I work in this gender equality now for 6 years, and then yes, I'm a bit impatient, to be honest.
Daniela, time goes by very quickly. We have a last question for you. Are there, I mean, at ETH, are there any plans for male parental leave?
Yes. Oh, at the moment, I think the pregnant women, they have the usual weeks. Yes. And at the moment, I think there's an initiative going on, and I think it already has started, or it will start next year, that also men or becoming fathers, they can take parental leave of 10 days. I'm not sure. 10 days, 14 days. And this is, I mean, this was not easy. This was really not easy. And when you compare it to Scandinavian countries, I mean, yeah, 10 days, 2 weeks, it's not much, but
Yeah, in the Nordic countries,
Yes.
much more, but it's the first measure.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you very much, Daniela. You stay with us because you can come back later. We
Yes.
have now Andrea, Dr. Andrea Zimmermann, the underrepresentation of women in science have historical roots. So we give now the floor to Andrea, Dr. Andrea Zimmermann from the Center for Gender Study at the University of Basel. 50 years ago, women in Switzerland gained the right to vote and to elect at the federal level. So what influence did this event have in the representation of women in the science profession? Dr. Andrea Zimmermann, you will present the gender policies at the Swiss University with a focus on sciences. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the welcome and the invitation to speak here in this webinar series on women in the natural sciences. And I think as I was listening to Daniela Hansen that our talks match quite nicely. We both draw to Londa Schiebinger, who is really well known in our community of gender and science. And we are both talking about this need of a change of the mindset and the imagination. This is where I start from today. I chose the title, Being the Only Woman is Not Particular Fun, Gender Inequality, Natural Sciences. And in the upcoming 15 minutes, I want to talk about, first of all, the participation and representation of women in science. And as we already heard a lot about numbers and figures, I will focus on the connection of representation and imagination of women in science and the question why we still struggle with the leaky pipeline. Second, why gender as category is so important to understand the dominant culture of science and how this dominant culture managed to privilege a special type of scientist. And third of all, a quick outlook on current challenges and best practices internationally. So to start with the historical event that you just mentioned, that is celebrated in Switzerland this year, it is the women's right to vote and the women's right to stand for election. And this has been a long journey until this came true. And this journey has been accompanied by a very emotional debate about the question if women are able to think politically and strategically and rationally, and attributes that are considered as necessary if you want to decide on political question or even to become a politician. So in this debate, the binary system underlying our gender order became more than obvious because men were so obviously linked with rational decisions. Women, in contrast, were linked with emotions, with feelings, with empathy, with their taking care of others. And it was this kind of femininity that seemed to be under threat then, as we can see on the following poster serving in the campaign against the women's right to vote. And here you can read, do you really want such women? So this is how women were imagined to deal with political debates. They were imagined without attributes that are connected with femininity, with softness or attractivity. In contrast, the female politician that is drawn here is a female variation of a male politician. We can see the square cut shape, the dress that reminds of the classical male outfit. And so women who engage in politics and rational debates lose their femininity and their ability to care about the family and the children if you follow the narration of this campaign. But luckily, this campaign was not successful. The women's right to vote was gained in 1971 and further steps towards gender equality were undertaken. So since 1981, the principle of equal treatment has been introduced to the Federal Constitution. 1996, the Gender Equality Act came into force, and there's another important historical date on the way to towards more gender equality. It is the reform of the marriage law, 1985. Husband and wife were considered to be partners, and the former patriarchal structure where the husband had to agree to his wife's employment was left behind. But of course, there's still a lot of work to do. And I just want to remind you of the ongoing protests against the so-called gender pay gap, the demand for better compatibility of job and family. And now the question, what does all this tell us about women in natural sciences? I want to point out again the binary system of gender norms that this campaign was relying upon. It is the imagined contradiction of logical thinking and rationality and femininity on the other side. And we can see this spelled out also in the famous results of the Picture a Scientist test. And this goes back to Londa Schiebinger. Now she's back again. Londa Schiebinger, one of the leading researchers in the field of gender and science studies, states, the situation for intellectual women in the United States and Europe has improved dramatically during the last 50 years. And she measures these changes iconographically because she was asking children to draw a scientist. And she finds out interesting changes in who is imagined to be a scientist in our society during the last decades. Here you can see the picture from the 80s. So it is a composition of what the image had created. The scientists, they wore eyeglasses, 86% wore eyeglasses, they had facial hair, 48%, 63% were wearing white lab coats, and last but not least, 92% were depicted as being male. So now we come to the 90s. The test was repeated, and the percentage of my male scientists drawn by school children had declined to 70%, 16% drawn as clearly female. The women here on the left, on the bottom, note that she's outside and that the flowers invoke nature. Interestingly, another 14% of the scientists were portrayed as ambiguous with respect to sex. So the person depicted here on the bottom on the right side is accompanied by a school child's note that says, this is a generic person, could be a man, could be a woman, could be any color, could have any kind of build. This note really is remarkable, but still rare in its time. So last time the Draw a Scientist test was repeated was in 2008. Now only 61% of the drawings depicted males, with 33% portraying females, and 6% were indistinguishable by sex. Although the representation of women improved, we can see standard gendered stereotypes in these images still. Harry, on the left side, he's explosively experimenting in his laboratory. He appears to be a chemist. And the female, unnamed, on the right-hand side is portrayed again in nature. In contrast to Harry, the female passively observes nature, but she's there. By these examples, I want to draw your attention to the necessities to rework these pictures. Otherwise, girls, women, anyone who does not identify with these stereotypical male attributes won't be able to imagine oneself in the field of natural sciences. So reworking, this is not easy, as we can see with this campaign that was launched by the EU. It wasn't probably meant to rework the images, but as we can see, the EU here mixed something up. The problem is not making women attractive for a male gaze in the setting of science, but making the sciences attractive for women. So the campaign was stopped after a very short time. But there are also very successful follow-ups. A film that has been released in 2020, you might have noticed it, Picture a Scientist, revealing the impressive biographies and also hurtful experiences of female scientists. And this movie has been shown in many universities by now around the globe, followed up by lively discussions. And in Switzerland, the 50th anniversary of the women's right to vote was also met by the campaign #NCCRWomen. This campaign aims at making women visible that are working in the several NCCRs throughout Switzerland and will run all year through. And by now there are already more than 80 portraits of women, of female researchers. So hopefully when asked to picture a scientist, the number of not stereotypical male scientists will still rise. To sum up this first part of my talk, we can see how the representation of women in science is changing, and this reworking of the imagination of female scientists is still a necessary and ongoing process. The power of representation to rework the stereotypical images of men and women has to be used to attract more women girls to sciences. And the figures are still alarming, as we just saw and heard in the talk of Daniela Hansen. But now in the second part of my talk, I want to change the perspective. Several years ago, the Stanford University decided to teach its women faculty how to negotiate for salary and resources, for example, lab space. And the idea was that women's salaries continue to be lower because when women are offered a job, they tend to say, oh, thank you so much, I can't believe you chose me. But when men are offered a job, by contrast, they tend to say, oh, I couldn't possibly work for that salary. So this pay gap from the beginning increases exponentially over a lifetime. But this excellent training in negotiating did not work out in the end. Women hit the same brick wall they always hit because the training was for women only and not also for the administrators they had to negotiate with. So for programs like this to be successful, the way universities do business need to change, not just the way women negotiate. So supporting women's research and careers is crucially important, but simply focusing on women is not enough. And we just heard this already in the talk by Daniela Hansen. While important, this approach has also been criticized for fixing the women, attempting to give women more education and so on. The implicit assumption is here that is criticized is that scientific research and the institutions themselves are gender neutral. Consequently, this approach fails to look beyond women's careers to reform scientific institutions and research methods. So achieving equality requires examining gender divisions of labor in science specifically, as well as considering how research is conceptualized and carried out. So this is also the fixing the knowledge that is left here, that's left out here on the slide, but that has been mentioned before. As Landa Schiebinger points out in her groundbreaking work, The Mind Has No Sex, Women in the Origins in Modern Science, that has been published in 1989, despite claims of objectivity and value neutrality, academic institutions have identifiable cultures that have developed over time and historically in the absence of women, to the extent that Western-style science has been replicated around the world. Institutional structures, cultural stereotypes, and social divisions of labor disadvantage women participation. So the second approach to the issue of gender equality, therefore, seeks to increase women's participation by reforming the research institutions. Institutional reforms range from counteracting subtle gender biases in hiring and promotion practices to restructuring work-life balance by offering parental leave, supporting dual careers, as well as child and elderly care, allowing for career breaks, and so on. In our project, in our cooperation project, Gender in Science, a very successful and ongoing cooperation between the NCCR MSE and the Center for Gender Studies here at the University of Basel, we found out once more how important it is not only to focus on the situation and performance of women in science, but to shift the focus from the individual women to the dominant structures and specific ideals of academia, which are rarely addressed, but that are very important to understand the situation in detail. So I want to introduce to you the image of the stereotypical scientist that we found in our research, and you might be very familiar with him. So we found a focus on reason and rationality. We found a focus on autonomy and mobility. And we found that success and competition in science are the only guiding principles in the life of the stereotypical scientist. So we hear being successful is essential. And finally, science is described as the only passion. My job is my life. So these stereotypes are very familiar. And what is important for us is that all these stereotypes are very closely linked with stereotypes of masculinity. So reason, autonomy, success, competition, they are all attributes for the concept of masculinity in our gender order, or as we would describe it for our research, important attributes for the academic habitus of masculinity. And these attributes, and this is very important, are also linked with our concept of excellence. So of course, this habitus and these attributes can be and are performed by female scientists as well, especially when they want to succeed. This academic habitus of masculinity or of masculine excellence has a strong impact on the issue of work-life balance and can lead to serious health problems due to stress, as we also heard in our interviews. And of course, these principles are incompatible with having or caring for a family. So what does this mean for female scientists? Just to make this point very clear, who have to position themselves in this field. They have to deal with positioning themselves in relation to stereotypes of masculinity and with being addressed as female persons with female attributes at the same time. So they have to perform stereotypes that are linked with masculinity on the one hand in order to be recognized as successful scientists, as excellent scientists. On the other hand, they are confronted with stereotypes of femininity, for example, that it's their natural gift to take care of others. And this ends up in that they get more recognition for their soft skills and for their scientific work. So they take care of other members in the research group. They're more responsible for the lab organization, the organization of the group, or the good atmosphere in the group. At the same time, very often they do not have dedicated partners who care for them or take care for their well-being in this competitive field, in contrast to their male colleagues, by the way. So to sum it up, women in this field always have to actively position themselves towards gender norms, in contrast to their male colleagues. So we hear them say, I've never been a girly kind of girl. They have to balance between not being too shy, too emotional, not too confident, versus being perceived as extreme, bossy, too much career-oriented, or even what we heard, testosterone-driven. So this is why female networks and encouragement for female scientists are so important. They have to deal with this additional layer of stress, and they really have to talk about this also among themselves. Furthermore, being the only women in a male-dominated research field, faculty or lab can result in the feeling of not belonging or not fitting in. In the words of a female researcher, and this, I was the only woman out of 20 people, and that was not particularly fun. And this is also where the stories about experiences of explicit and implicit sexism comes in. So what is important to realize is this habitus of masculinity that I just laid out to you here is privileged in academia, and this makes female talent leave. Or in other words, the male-dominated academia privileges a certain type of stereotypical masculine behavior, and this is for young female researchers even more exhausting and unattractive than from their male colleagues. It is important to notice that it's not research per se that is unattractive for women. On the contrary, it is the circumstances that saw research, not only, but especially for female talents. So because besides the quantity over quality principle, or the general high workload of an academic career, there is for female researchers this additional layer of stress, of not feeling of not really belonging, fitting in, and so on. So one of the key findings of our projects is that it's not the female researchers that don't make it, but they actively decide to leave academia in relatively great numbers because the stereotypical masculine working and life conditions are simply not attractive enough for them. They hurt. Therefore, the leaky pipeline can be interpreted as an active and conscious decision of female, but more and more also young male researchers between an academic career and a meaningful and well-balanced life, as we heard, which might also include having time for a family, other interests that seem not possible to combine with an academic career. So at the end of this short talk, let us see how this situation can be improved. And I just brought along 3 examples. First of all, the work-life balance, of course, is still a big issue, especially for young researchers. And we can see this best practice from the Heidelberg University. So academia has to think about improvement. Important is the support for parents, support that should be offered to every parent, the female and the male parents. So second, we see a rising commitment of national research foundations or agencies. The performance in gender equality becomes an important factor for funding, as we see, for example, the excess of Athena Swan, we see it on the left, on the top, in the UK. The principle there is that to be eligible to apply for funding, you need to go through a certification process that focuses gender equality. And third, the topic of sexual harassment and gender-based violence is becoming more and more important. Several projects and programs are developed these days to prevent abuse in higher research, and Sweden is there absolutely top. So to come to an end, it has been a long road that women could become part of the scientific community, and still they have to deal with stereotypes in their everyday life in labs and research groups, as we could see. But hopefully further steps towards gender equality will be taken. Besides encouragement and visibility for female researchers, we therefore need a cultural and structural change, a reworking of gender norms and our concepts of excellence in research institutions, to make room for more diversity and scientists with different ideas of how to combine life and work. Thank you for your attention, and I come to an end here.
Thank you, Andrea Zimmermann, and thank you, Daniela Hansen. We are coming practically to the end of this hour together, but we have a lot of questions. I'm sorry we can answer all of them, but Andrea, one question. What about creating women-only professor positions? Ask one of our followers. What do you think?
Did I understand rightly? Women-only positions?
Yeah, professor positions only for women. A kind of quota.
Yeah, a kind of quota.
If you can answer rather quickly, because we are at the end.
I think this is a quota is an important instrument for a special period of time. When you see the leaky pipeline, you know, and the really disadvantage that women have in this field, it might be an instrument to develop the situation further and to create more role models to bring into this field. This is very important for female researchers, and Daniela Hansen mentioned this before. So maybe for a special period of time, this might be an instrument just to change things, because we're so slow with the change.
And another question, Andrea, of the increased number of female professors, what is the percentage of mothers? Do you know? Do you have this number?
The percentage of mothers in the whole field of natural sciences in Switzerland? Yeah. I don't know this, but what I found out during my research now, that there is not a single professor in chemistry, like an ordinary professor, that has children. That was the status quo last year. So maybe this changed until now, but I was really impressed by this finding, I have to say.
It was a good question. Perhaps I have a question at the University of Basel. You are working for what facilities are provided for mother or even father to child care, or I don't know. What have you for the mother?
Well, you know, we are bound to the reglement of the university as well. So even if we're the Institute for Gender Studies, but what we try and what is kind of important also for the everyday life, that there's a room where you can, for example, breastfeed your kid, or, you know, you can just, you have a changing room, or you can bring the kid along, like some facilities are there. And I think this is an important factor also to change, you know, the cultural setting, the structural setting. But yeah, I think there are a lot of steps to take, especially the question of parental leave. And I heard this in the discussion before. Are there any programs for male leave also for the fathers? And I know that there are initiatives, but it's really hard to get them through. The NCCRs really try hard to make progress there, to also offer a parental leave to the fathers, and or, you know, to give it to the couple, how to split the parental leave. Something like this would be really relevant to change the situation, I think. Yeah.
Thank you, Andrea Zimmermann, and thank you, Daniela Hansen. We are coming to the end of this hour together. To sum up what has been said today, one can observe a progressive disappearance of women as they advance in their career. Leaky pipeline phenomenon. The combination of career and family is still very hard in Switzerland. They have solution, but the situation is changing, but very slowly, as said. And this situation has historical roots. We have 8 more webinars together to find and to promote, to provide solutions. We thank you very much, Andrea, Daniela. Thank you very much, Andrea Zimmermann, for this very interesting contribution and presentation. Thank you for you, the audience, for your interest. You can watch this webinar on YouTube. It was recorded, and we will make a summary of today's discussion and presentation on the Swiss Academy of Science platform. See you on September 27 for our next webinar dedicated to the role of women in leading position in science, naturally. Thank you very much. See you.